Racist cop shot a black army major at a gas station. Then he's sentenced to 25 years. Put your hands on the wheel where I can see them. Now! The screamed command shattered the midnight silence. Officer Zachary Ward's service weapon trembled, aimed squarely at the driver's window. "Officer, I am unarmed. My hands are visible," came the calm, disciplined voice of Major Tasha Robinson, her military uniform barely illuminated by the flickering gas station lights. She didn't flinch. But Ward's finger was already tightening on the trigger. A terrifying bang echoed through the pouring rain, changing 2 lives forever. What happens when a corrupt badge meets an unstoppable force? The relentless North Carolina rain hammered against the roof of the midnight blue Mercedes-Benz AMG, sounding like a steady drumbeat of impending doom. It was 2:15 a.m. on a desolate stretch of Highway 87, just 20 miles outside the sprawling gates of Fort Liberty, the massive United States Army installation formerly known as Fort Bragg. Inside the vehicle sat Major Tasha Robinson. She was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that only comes from a grueling 14-hour shift coordinating logistics for a rapid deployment airborne division. Still clad in her operational camouflage pattern, OCP uniform, the bronze oak leaf on her chest dull in the shadows, all she wanted was to fill her tank, grab a black coffee, and get home to her golden retriever. She pulled into the glaring neon oasis of a 24-hour Exxon station. The fluorescent canopy lights buzzed like angry hornets. As Tasha stepped out to insert her card into the pump, she didn't notice the black and white cruiser idling in the shadows across the street. But the predator in the cruiser had certainly noticed her. Officer Zachary Ward despised the night shift, but more than that, he despised the changing world around him. A 10-year veteran of a small, underfunded local precinct, Ward was a man defined by his prejudices and a fragile ego masked by a shiny tin badge. He watched the sleek, expensive Mercedes pull into the Exxon. Then he saw the driver. A black woman. To Ward's warped, prejudiced mind, the math was simple, racist, and entirely fabricated. A black woman driving an $80,000 car at 2 a.m. meant she had to be involved in something illegal. He didn't care about the Fort Liberty bumper sticker. He saw an opportunity to exert power. Ward threw his cruiser into drive, flipping on the flashing red and blue lights as he aggressively accelerated across the wet asphalt, boxing Tasha's car in against the pump. Tasha, startled but maintaining her military composure, slowly withdrew her hand from the gas nozzle. She didn't make a sudden move. She didn't shout. She stood perfectly still, the rain slicking her dark hair against her forehead. Ward kicked his door open, stepping out into the downpour. His hand was already resting heavily on the grip of his Glock 19. "Get back in the vehicle, now!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with artificial authority. "Officer, is there a problem?" Tasha asked, her voice steady, projecting the command presence she had honed over 3 combat tours in the Middle East. "I said get back in the damn car," Ward screamed, drawing his weapon and pointing it directly at her chest. Recognizing the irrational panic in the officer's eyes, Tasha immediately assessed the threat level. This man was dangerous, poorly trained, and looking for a reason to pull the trigger. She complied slowly, raising both hands to shoulder height, palms open and visible. "I am complying, officer. I am getting back in the vehicle," she stated clearly. She slid back into the driver's seat, keeping her hands resting on the top of the steering wheel. Ward approached the driver's side door, his gun still leveled at her window. He was breathing heavily, high on the adrenaline of his own manufactured crisis. "License, registration, and proof of insurance. Do it slow." "They are in my glove compartment on the passenger side," Tasha explained patiently, knowing the fatal statistics of traffic stops gone wrong. "I will need to reach across to get them. I am a major in the United States Army stationed at Fort Liberty. I am unarmed." "I don't care who you think you are," Ward spat, shining his blinding tactical flashlight directly into her eyes. "Reach for it. Slow." Tasha turned her head slightly to avoid the blinding beam, keeping her left hand firmly on the wheel. She slowly reached her right hand toward the glove box. It was a textbook, non-threatening movement. But Zachary Ward's mind had already written a different script. In his head, he was the hero confronting a dangerous cartel member. As Tasha's fingers brushed the latch of the glove box, a sudden gust of wind slammed the Exxon station's metal trash can against a concrete pillar with a loud clang. Ward panicked. His racist paranoia overtook whatever minimal training he possessed. "Gun! She's got a gun!" he shrieked into the empty night. Before Tasha could even turn her head, the deafening roar of a 9mm gunshot shattered the window. The glass exploded inward like deadly snow. Tasha felt a horrific burning impact tear through her upper right shoulder, inches from her collarbone. The kinetic force slammed her back against the leather seat. Blood immediately began to pool, staining the digital camouflage of her uniform a dark, horrifying crimson. She gasped for air, her vision blurring as Zachary Ward stood in the rain, smoke curling from the barrel of his gun, realizing exactly what he had just done. The silence following the gunshot was heavier than the North Carolina rain. Officer Zachary Ward stared at the bleeding woman slumped over the steering wheel. Panic, cold, sharp, and self-serving, gripped his chest. He didn't reach for his medical kit. He didn't apply pressure to the wound. Instead, his right hand instinctively flew to his chest, his thumb pressing hard against the power button of his Axon body camera. Click. The recording stopped. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. CEO," Walter yelled into his shoulder mic, his voice trembling as he began weaving his web of lies. "Shots fired at the Highway 87 Exxon. Suspect reached for a weapon during a felony stop. I need EMS here now." Within minutes, the flashing lights of an ambulance and 3 backup cruisers illuminated the gas station like a morbid carnival. Paramedics rushed to Tasha. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse thread thin. The bullet had struck the subclavian artery and she was bleeding out rapidly. "She's critical. We need to medevac her to Walter Reed immediately if she's going to make it," the lead paramedic shouted over the rain, recognizing her military ID. While EMTs fought to save Tasha's life on the wet pavement, Ward was already setting his defense. He stood by his cruiser, playing the traumatized victim to his arriving sergeant, a man named Miller who was notorious for protecting his own. "She wouldn't listen, Sarge," Ward lied, his eyes darting nervously. "I told her to keep her hands visible. She lunged into the glove box. It was dark. I thought I saw steel. I had no choice." Sergeant Miller patted Ward's shoulder, a gesture of corrupt solidarity. "Take a breath, Zach. We'll secure the scene. You did what you had to do to go home to your family." They searched the Mercedes. They found no drugs. They found no illegal contraband. And most damningly, they found no weapon. Just a leather wallet containing her military ID, a spotless driving record, and a receipt from a Fort Liberty base exchange. To fix this, the precinct closed ranks. They issued a vague press release by morning. An officer-involved shooting occurred after a non-compliant suspect made sudden movements during a high-risk traffic stop. The local media ran with it, subtly assassinating Tasha's character before the sun even rose. Meanwhile, a Black Hawk helicopter touched down on the helipad at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Maryland. Major Tasha Robinson was rushed into emergency surgery. For 14 grueling hours, trauma surgeons operated to repair the shattered artery and remove the bullet fragments lodged perilously close to her spine. When they finally wheeled her into the intensive care unit, she was in a medically induced coma, hooked to a terrifying array of ventilators and monitors. Her commanding officer, a decorated 3-star general named Marcus Vance, arrived at the hospital less than 24 hours later. General Vance had served with Tasha in Afghanistan. She had once coordinated an airlift that saved his pinned-down platoon. Standing outside the glass of her ICU room, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of the ventilator, Vance's face turned into a mask of cold, terrifying fury. He had read the local police report. He knew Tasha. The report was a fiction. Back in Oak Haven, North Carolina, Zachary Ward was living it up. He was placed on paid administrative leave, a standard procedure that felt more like a vacation. At a local dive bar frequented by off-duty cops, Ward bought rounds of drinks. "You gotta do what you gotta do to survive the streets," he boasted to a rookie, feeling completely untouchable. He believed the narrative was locked. The body cam was off. His sergeant backed him. It was his word against a woman who might never wake up. But Ward had made one catastrophic miscalculation. In his frantic rush to control the narrative and secure the Exxon station's main security hard drive, which he conveniently claimed was corrupted, he failed to notice the small, sleek dome camera mounted discreetly on the ice machine. The owner of the Exxon, tired of late-night vandalism, had installed a secondary, hidden 4K camera system just 4 days prior, and this system didn't save to a local hard drive. It uploaded directly to a secure, encrypted cloud server. While Ward drank his beer, laughing about his guaranteed pension, General Vance was making a phone call to a very specific unit within the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The cover-up was complete, but the storm was just beginning. For 3 agonizing weeks, Major Tasha Robinson drifted in the dark void of a medically induced coma. In the pristine, sterile halls of Walter Reed, her family held vigil. Her mother, holding a worn Bible, sat by her side day and night, praying for a miracle. Outside the hospital, the narrative was turning ugly. The police union in Oakhaven had hired a ruthless PR firm to leak unnamed source rumors, suggesting Tasha was insubordinate and aggressively resisting arrest. But Special Agent David Miller of the FBI wasn't reading the tabloids. General Vance's phone call had triggered an immediate, quiet federal investigation into the civil rights violation. Agent Miller arrived in Oakhaven like a ghost. He didn't check in with the local police department. He didn't request their files. He knew they were tainted. Instead, he went straight to the source, the Exxon gas station. It was there he met Mateo, the 60-year-old station manager. Mateo was terrified. He had seen the police intimidating locals, warning them not to talk to the press. But when Agent Miller flashed his federal badge and explained that a decorated U.S. Army major was fighting for her life because of a lie, Mateo's conscience overrode his fear. "They took the DVR from the back office the night it happened," Mateo whispered, looking nervously out the window. "Officer Ward, he said it was evidence, then they claimed it was broken." Mateo paused, his hands shaking as he unlocked his smartphone. "But they didn't know about the new system. It points right at pump number 4. Agent Miller's heart hammered as Mateo pulled up the cloud storage app. There it was. Crystal clear, 4K resolution, color video with synchronized audio. Miller watched the footage in the back of his unmarked SUV. He watched the aggressive, unprovoked stop. He heard Tasha's calm, compliant voice. "I am a major in the United States Army. I am unarmed." He saw her hands clearly resting on the wheel. He saw her slow, announced movement. And then he saw Officer Zachary Ward jump at the sound of a falling trash can and blindly fire a bullet into a cooperative woman's chest. Furthermore, the 4K camera captured exactly what happened next. It clearly showed Ward reaching up and turning off his body camera immediately after the shot. It was premeditated concealment. It was the smoking gun. 2 days later, at Walter Reed Medical Center, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor changed tempo. Tasha's mother gasped, dropping her Bible. Tasha's eyelids fluttered, heavy and drugged, but slowly, miraculously, they opened. She was groggy, in immense pain, and unable to speak around the breathing tube. But her eyes locked onto her mother. She was alive. When the doctors finally removed the tube, Tasha's first raspy, agonizing words weren't about her pain. She looked up at General Vance, who was standing at the foot of her bed. "Sir, I didn't resist. He just shot me." "I know, Major," General Vance said, his voice thick with emotion, placing a gentle hand on her uninjured arm. "And we are going to burn his world to the ground." The trap was officially set. The FBI didn't release the footage immediately. They allowed the local Oakhaven Police Department to officially clear Officer Zachary Ward of all wrongdoing. The Chief of Police held a press conference proudly standing next to Ward, declaring the shooting justified and within departmental policy. Ward stood at the podium wearing a smug, arrogant smirk, thanking the community for their support during his difficult trauma. They had no idea they had just walked directly onto a federal landmine. The moment the local police closed their case, the Department of Justice struck. Federal marshals descended on the Oakhaven Police Department at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. Officer Zachary Ward was sitting at his desk, drinking coffee and looking at real estate listings for a vacation home he planned to buy with his inevitable, emotional distress lawsuit money. "Zachary Ward?" a stern voice demanded. Ward looked up to see 3 men in tactical vests with U.S. Marshals stamped in bright yellow across their chests. "Yeah? Can I help you?" Ward asked, his smirk faltering. "Zachary Ward, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Major Tasha Robinson and the deprivation of civil rights under colour of law. Stand up and put your hands behind your back." The coffee cup slipped from Ward's hand, shattering on the linoleum floor. The Karma train had just arrived at the station, and it had no brakes. The federal courthouse in Raleigh, North Carolina was packed to maximum capacity. The air was thick with tension, the gallery divided between military personnel in crisp dress uniforms and a smattering of police union representatives looking increasingly nervous. The trial of the United States versus Zachary Ward had become a national sensation. Officer Zachary Ward sat at the defense table, his arrogance replaced by a pale, sweating desperation. He had hired a high-priced defense attorney, a slick man named Harrison, who specialized in getting dirty cops off the hook. Harrison's strategy was vile but predictable. Paint Major Tasha Robinson as a hyper-aggressive, combat-traumatized soldier who disobeyed a lawful order, forcing a terrified officer to defend himself. For 3 days, the defense chipped away at Tasha's character. They brought up the stresses of her combat deployments. They questioned her tone of voice. They tried to muddy the waters. Ward began to sit up a little straighter in his chair, a faint glimmer of his old smugness returning. He still believed his word, the word of a white police officer, would hold more weight in front of a jury. He didn't know about the 4K footage. The prosecution had masterfully kept it sealed under a federal evidentiary rule until the absolute perfect moment. On the 4th day, Major Tasha Robinson took the stand. The courtroom fell dead silent as she walked down the aisle. She wore her Army service uniform. Her chest was adorned with ribbons, including a bronze star. Her right arm, however, hung slightly stiff, a permanent reminder of the nerve damage from the bullet. She sat in the witness box, her posture perfect, her gaze locking onto Zachary Ward with the intensity of a laser-guided munition. Ward actually flinched and looked away. The prosecuting attorney, a sharp, relentless woman named Sarah Jenkins, walked to the podium. "Major Robinson, Officer Ward claims you shouted at him, refused to show your hands, and violently lunged into the glove box to grab a weapon. Is that true?" "No, ma'am, that is a complete fabrication," Tasha answered, her voice ringing out clear and authoritative. The defense attorney objected, practically leaping out of his chair. "Objection! Hearsay! It's a classic he said, she said, Your Honor. The officer's body cam malfunctioned and the gas station DVR was corrupted. This is purely speculative." Prosecutor Jenkins turned to the judge, a tight, triumphant smile playing on her lips. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to introduce Exhibit 42 into evidence, a high-definition, audio-synced video recording from a secondary, cloud-based security camera located at the Exxon station, provided to the FBI by the station manager." The colour completely drained from Zachary Ward's face. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. His defense attorney, Harrison, froze, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Wait, what camera?" Harrison whispered to Ward, panic bleeding into his voice. Ward just stared blankly ahead, his breathing ragged. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. A massive flat-screen TV was wheeled in front of the jury box. Jenkins pressed play. The 4K video filled the screen. Every raindrop, every neon reflection, every detail was pristine. The audio echoed through the silent courtroom. "Officer, I am unarmed. My hands are visible." Tasha's calm voice played. "I don't care who you think you are. Reach for it, slow." Ward's unhinged screaming followed. The jury watched, horrified, as the trash can fell in the background. They watched Ward flinch like a coward. They saw the muzzle flash. They saw Tasha thrown back, bleeding heavily, but the most damning moment was yet to come. The video continued. It showed Ward standing over her bleeding body, reaching up and deliberately turning off his body camera. A collective gasp swept through the gallery. Even the police union representatives in the back row lowered their heads in shame. Prosecutor Jenkins paused the video on the exact frame of Ward's hand on his body cam switch. She turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, Officer Ward didn't make a mistake. He made a choice. He chose to shoot an unarmed, complying military officer because of his own prejudice and cowardice. And then, while she bled out on the pavement, his first thought was not to save her life, but to save his own skin. When Zachary Ward was forced to take the stand the next day, he was a broken man. Under Jenkins' relentless cross-examination, his lies fell apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. He stuttered. He contradicted himself. He finally broke down, weeping uncontrollably on the stand, admitting he was scared and just wanted to make sure he went home. "Major Robinson wanted to go home too, Mr. Ward," Jenkins fired back sharply. "But you almost sent her to a graveyard. No further questions." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When the jury foreman stood up to read the verdict, you could hear a pin drop in the federal courthouse. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Zachary Ward, guilty. On the charge of deprivation of rights under colour of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant guilty. Zachary Ward collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his trembling hands. The facade was entirely gone. He was no longer a big, tough cop. He was a convicted felon. A month later, the sentencing hearing took place. Judge Eleanor Davies, a no-nonsense federal judge with a reputation for punishing corrupt officials, looked down at Ward with pure, unadulterated disgust. "Mr. Ward," Judge Davies began, her voice echoing with the weight of absolute authority, "you were given a badge and a gun to protect the public. Instead, you weaponized your authority against a decorated officer of the United States Armed Forces simply because she did not fit your prejudiced, narrow-minded view of who belongs in an expensive car. Your actions were cowardly. Your attempt to cover up your crime was despicable. You are a disgrace to the uniform you wore. Ward stood at the defense table wearing a bright orange federal jumpsuit, his wrists and ankles bound in heavy chains. He looked back at the gallery searching for his wife, but the seat was empty. 2 weeks after the video was played in court, disgusted by the monster she had been married to, she had filed for divorce, taken full custody of their children, and moved out of state. Ward was utterly alone. Zachary Ward, for your heinous crimes, I sentence you to 25 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. This sentence is without the possibility of parole. You are remanded to the custody of the United States Marshals. Get him out of my sight. The slam of the judge's gavel sounded like a cannon shot. Karma had come to collect its debt in full. The fallout was massive and immediate. The Department of Justice launched a full-scale civil rights investigation into the Oak Haven Police Department. The corrupt Sergeant Miller was fired, indicted for his role in the cover-up, and stripped of his pension. The entire department was placed under a federal consent decree, effectively restructuring it from the ground up. As for Zachary Ward, he was transported to USP Atlanta, one of the toughest federal penitentiaries in the country. The first day he walked onto the cell block, the heavy steel doors slamming shut behind him with a terrifying finality, reality set in. In the outside world, he was a predator hiding behind a badge. In here, surrounded by hardened criminals, many of whom were put there by cops just like him, he was at the absolute bottom of the food chain. He would spend the next 9,125 days locked in an 8x10 concrete box, haunted by the memory of the rainy night he threw his life away for a moment of racist ego. 2 years after the shooting, the sun shone brightly over the manicured parade grounds of Fort Liberty. A military band played brisk, uplifting marches as hundreds of soldiers stood in perfect formation. Standing on the reviewing stand was Tasha Robinson. She was no longer a major. She was now Lieutenant Colonel Robinson. Her recovery had been brutal. Months of agonizing physical therapy to regain the use of her right arm. Nights spent waking up in cold sweats, fighting the trauma of the gunshot. But Tasha was a soldier. She refused to let Zachary Ward's bullet dictate the rest of her life. She fought her way back to active duty, passing her physical fitness tests with flying colors, driven by an unyielding spirit. General Vance stepped up to the podium, pinning the silver oak leaf to her collar. For extraordinary resilience, unbreakable character, and continued dedication to the United States Army, Vance announced into the microphone. Congratulations, Lieutenant Colonel. Tasha turned and saluted the general, then turned to face the troops. She looked out at her family in the front row, her mother smiling through tears. She had survived the worst of humanity and emerged stronger, proving that true power isn't derived from intimidation and a gun, but from integrity, discipline, and the truth. Miles away, in a dark, claustrophobic cell in Atlanta, a graying, terrified Zachary Ward sat on a thin mattress, staring at a concrete wall. He had lost his freedom, his family, his pension, and his pride. He was a ghost of a man, crushed under the immense, crushing weight of his own karma. Justice had not only been served, it had been permanently etched into history. What an absolute roller coaster of justice and hard-hitting karma. Major Tasha Robinson proved that true strength doesn't come from a badge and a gun, but from resilience, truth, and an unbreakable spirit. Officer Zachary Ward thought he was above the law, but the universe and a hidden 4K camera made sure he paid the ultimate price. He's now sitting in a federal cell for the next 25 years with no one to blame but himself. If this story made your blood boil and then cheer for justice, make sure to hit that like button right now. Share this video with your friends to spread this incredible story of karma. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our dramatic true crime and karma stories. Leave a comment down below. What would you have said to Zachary Ward as he was being handcuffed? Let us know.